Welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and you're about to hear the third installment of Bill Yohnka's Yarn Factory Listeners storytelling event that was recorded live Tuesday, June 11th, 2024 at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee. We will hear from 5 magnificent storytellers today. Connie Lemon, who tells the story about meeting a famous baseball player, Jahana Holloway, who has been a guest on the podcast earlier this year, and she tells the story about how she rose out of the pandemic as a new person. It's a little of a variation of a story she's told before. There's some points that she told this night that I think she didn't actually share on her podcast episode with Derek Grant. Jeremy Van Kley, who tells the story of traveling abroad and teaching English to Middle Eastern children, and how it didn't exactly turn out how he thought it would, but it ended up being a really great story. One of my favorite stories that night. Edwin Yohnka, who is a cousin of Bill's, he tells the story of how he met Maya Angelou, and Shea, who once ran for the mayor of Kankakee. She told a story kind of last minute, actually. It was originally supposed to be someone else storytelling, and that person unfortunately got sick, and Angela stepped right in and told a really great story. So if you want to hear or want to join us for the next event live in person, Yarn Factory Listeners takes place the second Tuesday of every month at Flanagan's Irish Pub in the basement of the Majestic in downtown Kankakee at 7 p.m. It's free admission. It's always a wonderful night filled with lots of laughs, heartfelt stories, and lots of listening as well. Thank you to Bill Yohnka, the Kankakee Public Library, and the Daily Journal for letting us collaborate with them on this monthly event. So let's get to it.
I'm Bill Yohnka. Thanks for being here. This is Yarn Factory Listeners. Do we have some first-time people here? You can raise your hand. There's some first-time people here. That's wonderful. And what we love about this event and what makes it special is that we're not watching the ball game anymore. We're finishing getting the drinks, but we are now going to just take time and just listen. And that's what I think really makes this something special. We'll take a little break in just a little while, and there's goodies over here. We'll catch up with everybody at the bar. It's great to see everyone here. We'll make that happen. But as you're sitting here tonight, I never want to make this, and the whole idea of it is never want to make it about just these people who are up here telling stories. You've all got stories. And the way we develop new storytellers is the people who are here listening. So if something comes to your mind as you're at home tonight reflecting on all the stories and think, you know what, maybe I do have a story to tell. Maybe somebody could benefit from the experiences I've had. Think about that and be open to signing up. We have a little sign-up sheet on the Kankakee Podcast table over there. And give me your name and your best contact information, and we'll get you lined up for a future one. So I see several people who've been part of this before. What a cool thing. Thank you all for coming back. People who've been storytellers, who've had this stage. It was really a neat thing to be able to have you. And unfortunately, in advance of this event, we had a couple people back out. And unfortunately, one was sick, one couldn't do it. And so we were a little short on storytellers. And filling in the role of Angelina Gear tonight is Shea. Where's Shea? That's the way they would say it in theater. They would say, there'd be a voice that would come on when you weren't expecting it. Yeah, I'm not that level yet. I wanted to tell you a quick story to inspire you to maybe be one of these storytellers. Are you okay with that? The story starts out on 5th Avenue in Kankakee at Sammy's Pizza, when Sammy's Pizza was run by somebody named Sammy. Not the original Sammy that started it in the 50s when really people didn't even know about pizza. Can you imagine a world where you didn't know about pizza? It was an exotic thing. It wasn't from this world. And well, by the time of the 1980s, the story I've heard is that my father was kicked out of Sammy's Pizza one night. There's some things that happened, and then he was told, I think you should leave. But eventually, him and the younger Sammy became good friends. And because of that, I planted flowers with my brothers and sisters outside of Sammy's. And now I assume it was to pay off bar tabs and things like that. But it was a nice activity to do as a kid. And became friends within the third generation of Sammy, his son, who was about my age, who went to school with me and then went to college with me. And when we were at college together, I noticed that he had a tennis racket in his room. So some friends of mine wanted to play tennis. I'm like, well, I got to borrow a tennis racket. Sammy April's got a tennis racket. I'll get one from him. So I used his tennis racket one day, played tennis. I'd played in high school a little bit, nothing serious, but I was on the team. So it was fun to go and play again. I kept the racket in my room. I didn't give it back to him right away. His door wasn't open. I don't know what was going on. But eventually, someone on the tennis team saw that I had a tennis racket in my room and said, hey, Bill, there's a guy that didn't show up who's on scholarship, who didn't choose to go someplace else. We need an extra guy on the tennis team because I have a racket in my room. I'm the first candidate. So I kind of said, well, yeah, let's do this. I'll be on the tennis team. This is going to be great. And what I forgot was that when I was in high school, there were some very good players from Kankakee who were like top state level. And they were very, very, very good, and I was not. And everybody at that level is very, very good. And so I joined the tennis team, and there's a guy on the tennis team who's a 9-ball billiards champion in Wales. And because we were not that clever, but we thought we were, his nickname became Wales. A very good nickname. There's another guy on the tennis team. These guys had big bags with lots of rackets, and he had his own racket stringing machine in his dorm room, and his name was a piece of health advice. And I never met somebody whose name was a piece of health advice. His name was Les Bacon. And I thought that just such a cute name. And he did not think that was funny, that his name was a piece of health advice. Anyway, we go on, we play tennis. I realize I'm not very good. The only person I ever beat was somebody who was like just on the team because he was a football quarterback and they were trying to keep him out of trouble. And so I only won one match my entire season. A little dejected, it's fine. But the local newspaper in Joliet, near where I went to school, heard, because my dad had worked there, that I was born with feet that were turned completely in, really a long way. And that when they had to break them and turn them back the right direction. And I don't remember this, I was a baby. But it sounded very traumatic when my dad described it to somebody at the newspaper office and telling them that my first pair of shoes they bought, the person in front of them in line bought an arm. Like you had to buy it at a specialty store. You couldn't just, they sold things like arms at the store they bought my first pair of shoes at. They wrote a story about me. They interviewed me and they asked me, so what was it like growing up handicapped? Obviously I wasn't handicapped. I said, I never thought of myself as handicapped. I'm just a regular guy who can play tennis, sort of. And this was, if you can remember, this is 1998. I don't know if you remember what very popular movie came out in 1998. Keep that in your mind. They came out and took pictures of me. They got me a full body with my feet all turned in and the ball coming in on me. And the newspaper article came out. Remember, it's 1989. A movie had just come out about 1998. Forrest Gump 2 was the headline. The subheading was Yohnka lands on his feet with the Lewis tennis team. And they had a big pull-out quote to explain my situation, saying, I never really thought of myself as handicapped. I was just a regular guy who could play tennis. And so the point of the story is, getting up here and doing a story is not like that at all. No one is going to think that you are this level of good or this level of good. We all have different ways of telling stories. And it's all about the kind of value people find. And some things relate to some people. Some styles really relate to some people and resonate with them. And there's value in all of them. And it's not like a tennis match where, I can barely lift my arm over my, I'm terrible. I'm not good at that game. But we're not judged on any of those kind of matrix in storytelling. So I want you to think about that you're ready for this, whether you realize it or not, because your whole life, you've been telling stories to people. And this is just an opportunity to stop and have a time when you know they're not going to interrupt you. I want to introduce our first real storyteller here tonight. What's awesome about this is our first storyteller is somebody who I heard stories about 20 some years before I ever met him. I traveled with my cousin across the country, who I find out later went to college with this guy. And I heard these tales of, well, there's this guy named Butters. There's a guy named Van Kley. There's all this cast of characters of people he went on adventures with. And once I randomly, he came to a storytelling event. And I realized what his last name was. Wait a second. That's the Van Kley from all of those stories. And now that he's kind of gone through different chapters in his life, I think it's really cool that he wanted to come here and share some of his experience, some of his story with us. So let's give a really warm welcome to Jeremy Van Kley.
Thanks, everybody. So in 1997, I was just finishing up college. I was in my last semester, and like most people at that time in their life, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it. I thought, okay, here's the deal. I've got one semester left. I'm going to finish up, and I want to do something really exciting. I want to have an adventure. And my roommate had just returned from a semester in Russia, and I thought, well, something like that would be really cool. So I signed up to teach English as a second language in the former Soviet Union. I thought, this is really cool. I love Russian history. I love Russian culture. I'm fascinated by it. I could go visit the Kremlin. I could grow my beard really long. I could wear a big fuzzy hat. I could be that guy, right? And I would have stories to tell forever. So I thought, I'm going to sign up to teach in the former Soviet Union. This was 6 years after the Soviet Union had collapsed. So now, if you know anything geographically about the former Soviet Union, you know that it is huge. In the west, it goes all the way to Eastern Europe and the Aral Mountains. In the east, over to Japan, the Pacific Ocean, it's like 30 miles away from Alaska. And that's just this way, right? To the north, the former Soviet Union extends beyond the Arctic Circle, where it's super cold in Siberia. That's where they sent all the prisoners. And in the south, all the way down to the Central Asian desert, down by Afghanistan. I thought, this is great. I'm going to go have this adventure and this experience, and I have all these expectations of what things are going to be like for me when I go teach English as a second language in the former Soviet Union. Well, as I got going in the process, things didn't exactly go as I expected. First, there was, where am I going to go teach? Well, the company that I signed up with said, yeah, you're going to teach in the former Soviet Union, but you're not going to go to Russia. They assigned me to teach in the Republic of Uzbekistan. Now, if you know anything about former Soviet geography, you know that is way down there in the desert, right next to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, you get the picture, right? One of the former Soviet republics, all the way down there. It was hot. I was not going to be wearing one of the big fuzzy hats. There would be no picture in front of the Kremlin. In addition, I thought I was going to go teach college students how to speak English as a second language. Well, when they assigned me to the Republic of Uzbekistan, they assigned me to the village of Dangara and a boys' boarding school. So no, I wasn't teaching college students how to speak English. I was teaching 16 and 17-year-old boys how to speak English conversationally. Boys who didn't know a whole lot of English to begin with. I didn't know their language, which was Uzbek. I'd studied Russian to prepare for my trip. That didn't work out so well. They didn't speak my language, I didn't speak theirs, but we tried to make it work. So my expectations were not coming to fruition. And there was one more thing. During the last part of my senior year, I met a girl. I didn't mean to meet a girl. I didn't really want to meet a girl at that point in my life, but I met her. She liked me, I liked her, and I thought, oh, crap. Now I'm going to go overseas for a year. Well, that's a whole other story, but spoiler alert, fast forward 27 years, she's sitting right there. So here I am in the village of Dangara, teaching English as a second language to 16 and 17-year-old Uzbek boys. It's several months in. I'm learning the culture. I'm sort of getting the lay of the land. And I'm learning, a little bit about what's around me. And one day after class, one of my students comes up to me and says, Professor Van Kley. Now, mind you, they just called me that. I didn't correct them. Professor Van Kley, would you like to go to the bathhouse with us? Huh. I didn't know there was a bathhouse here, but I don't have anything to do. I don't have a phone. I don't have a TV. I don't have email. I don't have a radio. There's only so many times I can read Atlas Shrugged. So, sure, I'll go to the bathhouse with you. And they said, all right, well, let's go. So this gaggle of students walks off through the streets of Dangara, Uzbekistan, and I follow, and we come to this building, and they walk in, and we go into this room, and it's the changing room, apparently, because all my students started getting undressed. And I thought, well, gosh, what do I do here? I guess I'll just do what my students do. They're going to sort of lead the way, right? So just a sidebar. When was the last time in your life that the best piece of advice you could give yourself was to model your behavior after a 17-year-old boy? They got undressed. I got undressed. So we're in our underwear, and we walk through this door, and they said, come on, Professor Van Kley. I didn't correct him. Come on, Professor Van Kley, let's go. So we walk through this door into this dark, hot cave. I mean, it was so dark. I couldn't see anything, and it was so hot. It was like Lucifer hot, right? Like my lungs were on fire. My eyes were burning. I couldn't see anything. And as my eyes started to adjust, I started to observe what was around me. There was a kind of a hole in the middle of the cave where there were all these rocks that were really hot that people were pouring water on to create steam, and that's why it was so hot in the bathhouse. There were no chairs. There was nowhere to sit. There were all these sort of like rock ledges that were hewn out of the cave. And what I noticed as my eyes started to adjust is that it wasn't just me and my students in there. There were dozens of other Uzbek men, all in their underwear, and everyone was staring at me. It was almost like someone came over the loudspeaker and said, everyone divert your eyes toward the pasty white guy who just walked in. That's essentially what happened. And I was like, all right. I wanted to be like that Homer Simpson meme, where he sort of like retreats into the bushes very slowly. Except there were no bushes. It was a cave. It was dark and it was hot. Well, pretty quickly, I noticed my students doing something peculiar. They were in what I can only describe as a rugby scrum. If you've seen a rugby scrum, you know it's just a bunch of guys who get down really low and they start grabbing onto each other in all these non-homoerotic ways, and they're like twisting each other, and I'm like, what is happening right now? And one of the students gets out of the scrum and he says, Professor Van Kley, I didn't correct him, Professor Van Kley, do you want a massage? You've heard the phrase, when in Rome, right? Yeah. This was one of those when in Rome kind of moments. I was like, well, all right, here we go. And I jumped in the scrum. And before I knew it, there was 7, 8, 9, 10 sets of hands just grabbing me all over the place, my arms, my legs, and they were twisting my skin. And it really hurt. It was like that third grade bully, that you had in class who would walk by and give you a pizza burn really fast. It was like 12 of those all at the same time. And what I noticed is like my skin was coming off. Layers of skin were coming off. Layers of dirt that I didn't even know existed on my body were coming off. Well, pretty soon the scrum was over, thankfully. And we all went to this other part of the cave where there were these spigots coming out of the wall. And we just rinsed all the skin and dirt off. And then we went back into the changing room and dried off and put our clothes back on. And then went out to this common area. And we sat and we drank tea for hours. And I realized a few things. First, this is how my students got clean. You see, for me, in the village of Dungara, in my posh apartment as a teacher, I had running water. I had a sink, I had a toilet, I had a tub. So I could bathe every day if I wanted to. My students didn't have that. And so every week, this was their routine. After class, they would go to the bathhouse and they would get clean by rubbing the dirt and the skin off. That was interesting. And I realized a few other things. As we sat around drinking tea and as my students were just joining in the fact that I was there with them and they were practicing their English and we were having conversations and they were learning about America and I was telling them all about this girl I'd met, I realized that my expectations didn't really come to fruition about this adventure. The adventure that I thought I was going to have, the adventure that I thought I wanted wasn't what I got, but the adventure that I got was really what I needed, I think. And as we continued to talk and as we continued to share our cultures with each other, I learned a few other things. I realized a few other things. The world is a whole lot bigger than my small Midwestern white male brain could ever comprehend. And I'm still learning that today. And I learned something else, that the world is a whole lot smaller than my Midwestern white male brain could comprehend, that we're so much more connected than we think. And there was one other thing I realized that day as well. Never in my life have I been so clean. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Let's give Jeremy another round of applause. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Our second storyteller tonight is the one who filled in the last minute. And I know everyone says, oh, my children are beautiful. They're smart. They're the best. Man, her children actually are. Like, it's not really a thing. She also ran for mayor of Kankakee at one point in her life. She has been a school board member, still works for the Kankakee School District, and she is like Kankakee's biggest cheerleader. Let's welcome to the stage Angela Shea.
Hello. Now, I know the goal of the storytellers is to be off book, as they say, but when you agree at 2 o'clock to do something at 7, you're cool with this, right? Okay, that's good. That's good. You guys, I love Bill Yohnka. Do you love Bill Yohnka? I want to make sure that I say this right to him because I've said it to many people. Bill Yohnka to me is like a human golden retriever because whenever I see him, it just makes me so happy. And he's always so happy. Like if he misses a ball, he's like, I'm going to get the next one. What's next? We're going to do the next thing. And it just makes me very happy. Who's a good friend? Who's a good friend? Okay, so, all right. But I digress. So, Bill has a way of getting people to agree to things and to say yes and to jump on things that they might not normally. And one of those things that he got me to say yes to years ago was to come out and sing the national anthem out at the races. Any racers here? Racers? With the car races. So I went out there, the dirt track races. I went out there and I've sang several times. And last year he invited me the first race of the year to come out and sing. And I said yes. And he said, this time we're going to do something different. We're going to have you go out into the middle of the track to sing so that it's not going to interfere with the metal overhead and all that. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I'm fine with that. And then he goes down and he said, we're going to go through that hole in the fence out to the middle. Okay. So I look, I'm like, okay, there's steps, going up. So we go out there and he's 20 feet ahead of me because he moves like that because he's like a golden retriever. He's moving fast. I'm really sorry. I hope that doesn't insult you. So he goes through the fence and when he opens the door, there's a pole across the thing. So it's not like you walk through the door. There's a pole. So, okay, I'm sitting down and I scooch over and now my legs are dangling over, but there's no steps on the other side because that's where the cars are going to be, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to scooch off of this, scooch, and hit the ground. And I scooch off and I hit the ground, the soft, unstable, uneven ground. And I hit the ground, boom, on my hands and my knees. It was very humiliating. And Bill had no clue that this was happening until he heard the collective from the crowd, the millions of people that were all watching me on the ground. So I did the only thing that I could do in that situation, which was to get up on my knees and go. And then Bill came and helped me up, which wasn't easy because I'm not a small woman. As he said, I am Kankakee's biggest cheerleader. I have changed that to number one cheerleader so that nobody thinks it's, size shaming or anything. So I go out and I sing, not very well, mind you, because I was like, and my neighbor who was back in the pits because her son and her grandson drive, she's like, you didn't sound the best last night. I'm like, oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate your enthusiasm and support. So I finished singing, and now I'm looking at this hole in the fence that I'm supposed to go back out through. Unless there's a Hoyer lift involved, I'm not getting through that hole. So I just look at it and I'm like, okay, the only thing that I can do is now walk off the track. But if you've seen the track, it's a long way from that hole in the fence down to the end of the track. They can't bring any cars out because there's a person walking on the track. It's like when I was 20 and I'm doing the walk of shame back to Leo's to get my car. Nobody has anything to look at except for me walking down, fat girl walking. It was so humiliating, okay? But I survived. I sang and I survived, and I can laugh about it now, and I laughed about it then. I mean, let's be honest. So really, when you do something humiliating, you have choices to make, and my choice is always to survive and to keep on moving. So I'd like to share a little bit about another humiliating thing that happened to me, and that sound that you hear is Bill going, oh my God, what's she gonna do? What is she going to do? Because we didn't talk about this at all. I promise it'll be okay. And somebody told me not to cuss. Although he was talking about like naked teenagers. That's not family friendly. I'm just saying. So, underwear. I'm sorry. Thank you. There was a joke there about, no, never mind. I'll tell you that one afterwards. Okay. So he mentioned that I ran for mayor. And I'm still very proud of what I did when I ran for mayor in the Democratic primary. Thank you. I did not win, but that's okay. It's really kind of a relief that I did not win. Instead, eventually Chris Curtis won, and Chris offered me a job with the city, and I was very excited to take the job as community liaison. And, it's a perfect job for me. My gosh, I'm Kankakee's #1 cheerleader. I get to go do all the stuff in Kankakee. And after 1 week, I resigned from that job. That was really humiliating. And there were discussions had and decisions made that led to my resigning from that job. And it's the hardest thing I've ever been through. And it was super humiliating. And I couldn't do a gymnast dance from that one. It was too big for that. So instead, I had to sit down and lick my wounds for a while. And in the couple of months after I resigned from that position, I've been employed since I was 14. I haven't been unemployed. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have a job, and I'm humiliated, and I did this all to myself. I have no one but myself to blame for this. So I would go and sit by the river. I love our river. We are very lucky to have it. And I would sit at Cobb Park, and the first couple of days after the humiliation, I would just sit there, and it was like the 1,000-mile stare. Oh my God, I'm a terrible person. Oh my God, what have I done? What am I going to do? Oh my God, I'm so screwed. Everybody's going to hate me. And then after a few days, it was, oh my God, what have I done? Oh, look, a bird. And then I realized that the river keeps on flowing, and it still looks the same on top, but that water just keeps on going. And it's the same river, but all that dirt and stuff, and the sediment from Indiana, but that's a different topic. All that stuff just keeps on going, and there's still a pretty river, and you can still enjoy that river. So I'd watch the ducks come in, and ducks are they're so cool when they're flying, and then they do this, whoa, splash. They look so ungraceful when they're landing, but that's okay, because then they're just swimming along. And I just kept swimming along, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Somebody marked, that's the first time I sang. That's kind of miraculous, isn't it, really? So I just kept going. And that's how I recovered myself from this whole situation that I put myself in. But then the next step is, how do you recover in the world? I miss Kankakee, my God, but I've been humiliated. Nobody cares about me. I'm going to hide. But I didn't hide. I'm in on the joke, and I've always been the type of person that wants to make sure that you know that I know that you know. And I don't care that you know. Let's just be clear that we all know. So let's not pretend like we don't know. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask me afterwards. And I actually did go up to some people who I saw doing the, and I went up to them and I said, do you have any questions? Is there something you want to know? And if there is, ask me. It's okay. I disappointed a lot of people. There were people that wrote me checks. There were people that were so thrilled to have a Democrat working with a Republican, and wasn't it going to be wonderful? But I resigned, and it was my fault. And what I've realized since then, things always work out the way they're supposed to. They always do. I got to be honest, I probably would have gone crazy in that job. Kudos to the people who can live it 24/7. They say that, if you want a job that you love, do something that you love. But it turns out I don't like to be paid for doing the things that I love, because I'm still out there. I'm like, oh, Merchant Street's coming up. What am I going to do this year? I'm still out there doing things and involved, but I'm not getting paid for it. But that's okay, because I have a job that I love. Uh-oh, you're looking at your watch. Is my time up? Okay, I'm just checking. I didn't time myself. Oh my God, what have I done? Now, this is the first time that I'm looking at my notes, make sure that I covered everything. The river keeps moving, and you gotta own your and then, I said the S word, sorry. And so I will tell you that after a few years since that has all happened, its water has gone way under the bridge, down to the Wilmington Dam, and it has kept on going. And I can stand here in front of everybody now and say, yeah, I was humiliated, and I survived, and I'm on to the next thing, and I can proudly go, yay! Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Well done. Let's clap for her one more time. Angela, thank you. Wow. Our next storyteller, then we'll take a quick break to grab a beverage and relax a bit and exchange tales with each other for a little while. Our next storyteller is, you may have seen his name in there. He's got the same last name as me, and he's actually a cousin of mine. And I think it's kind of cool that when you search Google Bill Yohnka, a lot of times what comes up is pieces of legislation that my cousin Ed has either been for or against, because it would be a bill and his name would be attached to it. It would be Bill and then Yohnka. But he's done a lot of big things with the Bar Association and then with the ACLU. And what I think is really cool is that his experience of growing up around here in Shabance is kind of always with him, and he's really still important to a lot of family who's here, and we'd like to welcome to the stage Ed Yohnka.
Thanks so much. And really, Bill, thank you for not only the introduction, but for including me here tonight. My two sisters are here, and I have not shared with them the story I'm going to tell, but I'm going to tell them now. It is not about our family, so you can relax. Although, boy, do I have some stories about our parents I could tell. But I want to say, and it's true, I was born and raised in Shabance. And if you'd have told the 10-year-old Shabance me that I would be here, let alone other places and places that I've been, I wouldn't have believed it. And so one of the other things, just sharing personal information, in a few months, I'm going to turn 65 years old. And I recently was on a long plane ride, and that notion occurred to me. And so I've been thinking a lot about how I got here. And so I want to tell you a story about how I got here and the best piece of advice that I ever got that did not come from my mother or father. And to tell this story, I actually have to go back to 1986. And in 1986, I'm living in Ohio, and on a June day, I am going to do one of the things that is one of my favorite things in life, still remains so today. If you want to find me happy, find me at a baseball stadium. So one June day, I'm going to go see the Cincinnati Reds. I'm going to go see that night. I'm going to go watch them play. This is the mid-'80s. Pete Rose is managing the team, betting on the team, as it turns out. But I'm going to go see the Reds. I am so happy. And in the middle of the day, I get a call. And I'm asked if I would skip the game and come to dinner. Did I mention that I love baseball? So skipping the game to go and have dinner did not really seem like all that attractive of a deal. And so the stakes were raised. If I came to dinner, I could pick the restaurant. Kind of good, but If I came to dinner, I could pick the restaurant and somebody else would pay. Well, they kind of had me then, So I went to dinner. And the odd thing was, I'm seated at dinner with this guy, and I'm talking to him, and it turns out that his friend is, at that time, like one of his best personal friends, is running the office of the president at the American Bar Association. I will confess to you, until that very moment, I did not know there was an office of the president at the American Bar Association. But it turns out that there is, in fact, an office of the president of the ABA, the National Organization of Lawyers. And I'm talking to this guy, and he tells me that his friend is really struggling because he really needs some help with someone to do some freelance speech writing and writing assignments for him. And was there any, I was a writer, I've been, written a lot. And he said, is there any way that you would consider helping my friend out? And he said to me, have you ever written a speech? And I'm like, oh, yeah, all the time. I'd never written a speech in my life. I am a Yohnka. And so I say, yeah, sure, because I thought this would be kind of fun. It's it's kind of a low risk thing. And I did that. This is June. This is like late June of 1986. By September 1st, I am living in Chicago, working full time for the president's office at the American Bar Association. And the next 12 years are like a blur, because I ended up in this situation where I was literally traveling all over the country with the president of the ABA and the board. I was going to Congress. I went on these trips. I was normally flying first class and staying in these incredibly high-level hotels. Here's a little tip. This is the one thing I can tell you about if you're in a really high-level hotel, how you know. If you ask someone where the bathroom is, they don't tell you, they walk you there. At 27 years old, when this very attractive young woman wants to do that, you're confused for a minute, but just go with it. And it turns out it's okay. I mean, I had these incredible adventures over this time. It's a different story. There are two different stories here, but I'll just tell you. I once spent an afternoon in a hotel suite in Honolulu, Hawaii, writing a speech with a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. And I got invited to the White House. And for me, this is interesting, by a Republican, it turns out. So, I had this incredible experience and this incredible opportunity over these years. And fast forward then to 1998. And in March of 98, I decide for some reason that maybe this isn't the end of my life. And it was a hard thing to do. Like, man, and I say this, I'm a side by side with the president of this organization. I'm like a dude, there are people who would call me because they couldn't get the president on the phone. So they would call me like I was a real guy. And so I have this incredible experience, but I think maybe this isn't the end of my life. Maybe this isn't it. And so I went to my boss at the time and I said to her, I think I have to go. I think it's time for me to leave. And I was tired of the travel and I had a wife and a young son at the time. And you make life decisions and it just felt like the right thing to do. And so my boss says to me, she goes, I understand. Completely understand, as supportive as could be. She says, I just need one little favor. I thought, okay, what's that? She goes, would you stay through August through the annual meeting? Just get us through this year, this fiscal year, this calendar year for the organization, and then, go, be happy, do whatever you want to do. So I think, yeah, I can do that. Except for it really wasn't a great decision for me, in part because every day that went by, I found myself just questioning whether or not I should go. And I dealt with it in the way that most white middle-aged men deal with it. I didn't speak to anybody about it and kept it all bottled up inside. I see some of you know this. Yeah. So by the time I get to August, from March, I get to August at the ABA annual meeting. By the way, the American Bar Association meeting in Toronto, Canada. It doesn't make any sense, don't ask. I'm like a mess. I walk around that meeting during the day like a senior on his last day of school. I am backslapping everybody and telling them I won't miss them and, all of these incredible things. And inside at night in my hotel room, I was scared to death. What's next? What is ever going to be like this? What will I ever do that will feel like this? So there's a thing you have to know about an ABA meeting. I take it nobody here has ever been to an ABA annual meeting. It is literally about 20,000 people moving from reception to reception, from dinner to dinner, from event to event. And there's a lot of big shrimp involved. And I'm going through this meeting and I'm literally like having a panic attack every night, but not talking to anybody about it because no, we wouldn't want to do that in any way. And so the other thing you have to know about an ABA annual meeting is you have these events where you have these major speakers, right? They have the president, or you have a cabinet member, or you have a Supreme Court justice, or, a member of Congress, or an author, et cetera. And for one of the big events that year, the speaker was Maya Angelou. Yeah. So the night of the event with Maya Angelou, I'm backstage putting the final changes to the president's address into the teleprompter, looking at the lighting, checking the stage, doing all that. And my friend, who was the director of meetings and travel, this lovely woman, Mary Cavallini, comes over and taps me. And she goes, come with me. I said, where are we going? She goes, let's go back and say hello to Maya Angelou. I'm going. She didn't have to ask me twice. So we walk back to this green room. Door opens, Mary and I walk in, and there's Maya Angelou, who's like a hero. And she welcomes us in this most incredible and gracious way. She asks us to sit down. She's got refreshments. Did we want anything? And we sit there and we're talking. She's very interested in like what we do at the ABA, who we are, what's going on. And at some point, for reasons I'll never know, and I've talked to her about this, Mary just turned and said to her, Maya Angelou, well, you know, Ed's leaving the ABA in a couple of days. I might have mentioned I hadn't talked to anybody about my anxiety. And so Maya Angelou looks at me and she says, that is so exciting. Isn't this incredible? She goes, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea. I said, to be honest with you, I'm scared to death. I've not told anybody in months, including my wife. Suddenly I'm telling Maya Angelou this story. Did I mention I'm a Yohnka? And so in this incredible moment of grace, Maya Angelou literally reaches across this little seating area where we are, and she takes hold of my hand, and she looks me in the eye, and she says, and I wrote this down because I didn't want to flub the words, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. That's from I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And I knew the words and I knew the story, but I could have never imagined it being directed and given to me as advice. And it was like an ocean wave hit me. And I walked out of that room like 3 feet off the ground and walked through the rest of the meeting feeling great. And by the time I got on the plane to go home, I was ready to move on with my life. And the kicker to that, as Bill sort of alluded to, is I spent the last 25 years of my life involved in work that really has mattered to me and has done things and changed things and of which I am incredibly proud to have been a part. And I don't know if I would have done it if Maya Angelou hadn't said those words to me. I don't know if I would have had the strength to even try if she hadn't told me those things. So I say to all of you tonight, if there is an untold story inside you, don't let it be an agony. Let it out, enjoy it, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate that. We have our next storyteller, and I'm so inspired by her, and just knowing about the trials, the tribulations, the setbacks, the hurdles that she's overcome, and not just overcoming those things, but then finding a way on the other side of it to support other people in so many ways. Jahana Holloway, could you come up here, please? Let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, Bill. You actually just told my whole story, so I could go sit down. But first of all, I just want to say, give yourself a hand. This whole audience is a whole vibe in here right now. For real, okay? Thank you so much. So tonight will be my first time telling this story in this type of way, in this type of setting. So could you please do me a favor and could you just say, we got you, Jahana? We got you, Jahana. Thank you so much. That helps me. I'm telling you, that helps me. So if you can relate to any of these that I say, could you please just give me 2 snaps? If you have ever been a people pleaser at any point in your life, I'm snapping with you, so snap, snap, right. She said snap, snap. If you have ever settled for less than you deserved in some area of your life, okay? If you have struggled with fitting in, like you just knew you were different, you just didn't fit in with most people. Oh, okay, I got some people in here. And then the last one is if you have ever struggled with feeling like you were enough at any point in your life. Okay, so that's me. That was me. That was my story. I used to seek validation outside of myself. I wanted approval so much. I wanted to be liked. And so it led me to make a lot of poor choices in life. And what I want to talk to you about I was going to come to you tonight and say, oh, I'll tell you about my childhood and all this stuff. And then it hit me like, stop coming from a place of pain and talk and speak from a place of power tonight. So that's what I'm going to do. So I want to take you to 2020 when I had my breakdown and my breakthrough. So we already know 2020 is a year that is etched in our mind forever and ever. I was on the top, feeling the top of the world. Like I was on top of the world. I was newlywed, pretty much like maybe 2-3 years in. I had a job I loved. We had just bought a house. So everything was going well for me. Then COVID hit in March. Then my baby sister passed in April. And then June, I shared before on the podcast, but I want to share because I want you to see the timeline. Her son was shot so many times. My nephew was shot multiple times. So 2 months after his mother passed, then he was shot. And so we didn't know if he would make it. And then you fast forward to July of 2020 when my life changed forever. I received an inbox message from a man I did not know. And he said, I need you to call me. It's about your husband. Now, first of all, it's not some Jerry Springer type scandal stuff like him and my husband. So don't get your mind out the gutter now. It's not that. So he had some information for me that he wanted to share. And so I gave him a call, and he told me so many things that I know was factual. He knew these things. He had dates, times. He knew a lot of things about my husband. He actually knew more about what my husband was doing than I did. And we call that receipts. When you have receipts and evidence to back it up, he had the receipts to back it up. I remember hanging up the phone, and I was just numb because it was a sick joke that I was a part of, and I didn't even know I was a part of the joke. The marriage was never real. Everything was an illusion. And I had been through so much in my life up until that point, not just in 2020, but just my entire life. So I don't know, can anybody relate where you just felt tired? You've been at a point where you like, I don't know if I could take anymore. Snap, snap, thank you. Snap, snap. If you've been like that and you just like, I can't take anymore. And that was where I was in that moment. So I remember on the side of my bed after I hung up the phone with him, I dropped to my knees right there on the side of my bed, and I screamed a cry that didn't even feel like it was coming out of me because I was just so numb and so tired. And I wept for a very long time, just sitting on the floor by myself. I had no idea where my life was going to go. I didn't know if I was staying with him, if I was leaving. I was just so confused, but I knew something had to change. But I sat there and I sat in it for a very long time. I don't even know how much time passed by, but I sat on the floor. And then I remember it was this moment when I decided to get back up. And when I got back up, I walked to my bathroom and the mirror was there. And I remember looking in the mirror and I told myself, she died back there. A part of me died right there on that floor where I sat and wept because I could no longer move forward with that type of behavior and letting people mistreat me, misuse me. And so that part of me had to die. And I remember looking at myself and I told myself in the mirror, who are you going to be now? I absolutely had no idea. Absolutely had no idea. But I want to share that fast forward to now because I asked myself that question and now I can answer it fully. I have moved on to use my story to empower other people. I overcame my fear. Dana, where are you at? Here. Dana used to work with me when I was like 19 or 20 years old. So she know I used to be a quiet person. I really was scared to come out in the public. Public speaking was not my thing, but I have used my voice to empower other people. I share my story with other people. I love on the babies, the youth. If you know me, I'm all about the kids. I love the youth. And so I work with them to help them maybe get on a different path than I had when I was younger. So that's who I am now, somebody that used my pain and I turned it into my purpose. Now, I want to say this. The biggest thing for me was to have my 4 daughters look at me and say, Mama, we're so proud of you. that's how I know it was all worth it. Even though when I was in that moment, it seemed like it was pain, it was traumatizing, but it was all worth it because now I have my daughters looking at me as a role model and not in disappointment. And then I never say this out loud because people normally like, oh, that's arrogant, you shouldn't say that. But I want to say this tonight. I am proud of myself. Okay? Snap, snap, clap, 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 clap. Yes, thank you. I'm proud of myself because a weaker person probably wouldn't be here anymore. They probably would have took their life at that point. Not to say weak like they couldn't handle it, but sometimes you can only take so much and then, so I decided to use it in a different way. I also want to say, I want to share this with you. It was an affirmation that I created for myself to remind myself that no matter what happens in my life, I am enough. And I want you all to understand, the ones who snap with me, please always know that you are. And please remember my story if you're ever going through anything and know that it is a light at the end of the tunnel, even though when you're going through it, it doesn't seem like it. So this is an affirmation I created for myself. I say it every day to myself. And it's, I am Jahana Holloway, and who I am, as I am, where I am, right here, right now, is more than enough. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jahana. Thank you so much. Our final storyteller of the evening moved to Kankakee area. It's been almost 20 years now since you moved here. And the way this works, if people are interested in telling stories up here, please sign up over there. There's a sheet on the table, and just give me some contact information, your name, and we'll get in touch. But what's cool about this is a lot of times it's different. Sometimes I talk to people, I text them, we ask how you feeling about it. We'll kind of go back and forth a little bit and like just kind of tell me what's going on. And I love that I had a chance to have lunch with Connie the other day. And it was really, I can honestly say I'm so excited to hear this story again, because it was really something remarkable. She's had a great career here in caring for people in a really unique way. And I want to welcome to the stage Connie Lemon.
Hi, thank you for having me here, Bill. I think I'm good.
Oh, you're okay? Okay.
Yep, I'm good. So I was here at the Storyteller event in April, and at the end of the event, Bill came out to tell everybody good night, but he said, it's so important that you have real conversations with each other. Have that be your takeaway, that you sit down and have a face-to-face conversation, not just texting and Facebooking and all that, but have a real conversation where you have a really in-depth conversation, get to know people. So when he said that, it made me remember a conversation I'd had with somebody who I had such a takeaway from. I thought, this guy was the best conversationalist ever. So my husband, Steve, is sitting over here. We moved from Western Illinois over to Oak Lawn, which is a near west suburb, in 2005. Moved here in 2012. But when we moved to Oak Lawn, one of the things I have to tell you about him is that he's this huge sports enthusiast, likes every sport out there, but he especially likes golf. So whenever we're out and about, he wants to stop and see a golf course that's real special to him. So one day we're driving and he says, we're really close to Cog Hill. Thank you. I knew it was going to slip. Cog Hill Country Club. And do you mind if I stop for a few minutes and go in and see it? So when he goes in, he's usually like looking in the pro shop and talking to the pro and all this. I said, you mind? I'll just stay in the car. I'm not a golf enthusiast. So I'm sitting in the car, and in a few minutes he comes out and he taps on the window and he says, you've got to come inside. There's something I want to show you. Well, usually what it means is he has a shirt he wants to buy. And he wants to know if I like it. So I'm like, yeah, go, just get what you want. It's good. And he's, no, there's something I have to show you. So I go in, we go through the pro shop, and he takes me over to the window that faces the golf course, and he says, look. I'm like, what are we looking for? And he's like, look who's in that golf cart. And it was Ernie Banks. And I'm like, oh my God. And he says, we're going out to talk to him. I'm like, no, we are not. We are not going to interrupt his day of golf. He's with his golf partner, and we're not going to interrupt his day and go talk to him. He's busy. And he's like, no, he's waiting to talk to you. And I says, what are you talking? He says, yeah, I was already talking to him. And I told him that you're a big Cubs fan and that you're really an Ernie Banks fan. He says, go get her. I want to talk to her. I'm like, oh my God. So what are you going to do? You're going to go talk to him, right? So we go out, and this guy was the most fabulous conversationalist. He starts with, like, where did you grow up? How did you guys meet? What was your wedding like? And, do you have kids? Things like that. Well, then he asks another standard question, which is like, what are your jobs? So Steve tells him, well, Steve at the time, he was the athletic director up at Morton High School in Berwyn and Cicero. So he's chatting sports with him. And he asked me, and I says, well, I'm a nurse. And he says, well, what kind of nursing do you do? Well, this is always a question that takes me back because, you see, I'm a hospice nurse. And so the answers to that can be all over the place when you say that. So it might be things like, oh, you people are angels, or that must be really hard work, or sometimes they tell us their story, their hospice story, and that's just fine because we're kind of a safe person to tell that story too, that they might not tell other people. One time I was at a hospital to see a patient, and this guy comes up to the desk and sees my hospice name tag, and he says, well, what is hospice? So I'm explaining it to him, and he says, so do you go home every night and drink? And I says, once in a while. So anyway, but then I always think, too, the most awkward situation was my husband and I were at a comedy club one night, and we were with friends, and it was an improv, and the guy's going around the room asking everybody, what's your name? What do you do? And the same question came at me. Like I said, I'm a nurse. And he says, no, what kind of nursing do you do? And I says, well, I'm a hospice nurse. And he says, well, what a way to bring down the room. I know. And so I'm like, that felt very awkward. So anyway, so you can understand a little bit of like when people ask that, like, I usually just say I'm a nurse. But Ernie says, no, what kind of nursing do you do? So I'm going to trust him. So I tell him, well, we live in Oak Lawn. I work for Advocate Health Systems, and I'm a hospice nurse. I am based at Trinity Hospital, and I admit patients to hospice care. He says, I'm familiar with Trinity Hospital. I'm like, oh, good. And he says, you must not be very successful there with what you do. And I was kind of surprised, and I said, I think I do okay. And he says, no, you need to understand. Well, what he knew is that Trinity Hospital, it's on the far south side of Chicago, and the patient population is about 85% African American. And he says, my community doesn't like to talk about death. And we believe in miracles. And so he goes on to talk about his philosophy with all this. We talked for a few minutes more. And finally I said, you guys need to get golfing. His partner was so patient. Oh my gosh. We must have talked, 20 minutes probably, plus the time it took Steve to go out to the car and get me and come back. So I was just like, we can't keep holding him up anymore. So he goes on golfing. We go back to the car. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we did not get a picture of him. We didn't get an autograph, nothing. I'm like, well, we'll just have it here. So it could have been the end of the story, but it really wasn't. So that week at work, I'm telling my director, Dawn, this story. And I said, I can't believe I didn't even get an autograph. And she says, my husband, Bob, golfs with Ernie. She said, would you like an autograph? And I'm like, yeah. So I brought in a paper bag with a baseball and gave it to her, and she takes it, and a few days later it comes back, signed, his little gold authentication seal on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, my prized possession, right? And then Steve says, well, at Morton High School, his booster organization was going to be having a fundraiser for the athletic department. And he says, do you think he'd sign some stuff for me? I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate to keep imposing on him, but I'll ask. So indeed, he signed a bat and some balls, and I don't know if there was anything else. Brought in a ton. It was an exciting moment at that live auction because it was the real deal, and it went for a lot of money, which really helped support a school that really needed the support. So I had 2 takeaways from this conversation. And one is, I think about this conversationalist that he was, and I think of a conversation kind of like an onion where you peel the layers. So the outer layer is where you get to know somebody, you know their name, and maybe where they live, and something pretty superficial, but then you peel away layers as you get deeper into that conversation. When we got to the point where he said to me about hoping for a miracle, he was educating me, right? And he was getting to the core of that onion in a conversation that got pretty deep as he talked. And my takeaway from that was it changed how I did hospice care. So when my role was always up front, meeting with the patient, that first meeting, which is pretty raw, it can be, but getting to know their history and what's going on with them and what their needs are gonna be. But when the time was right in the conversation, I would ask, what do you hope for? And I found that was the most important question of the whole conversation. And sometimes it was, I'm hoping for a miracle. And I would say to them, I'm hoping for a miracle for you too. I'm going to pray for that for you. Because you see, whether you're on hospice or not on hospice, that miracle can still happen, right? It's out of our hands whether there's a miracle is going to happen. So I'll pray right along with you. But it might be hope for seeing a grandchild who's overseas in the military and they don't think they're going to see him again. Guess what? We can call the Red Cross and get them home. There's all kinds of things that can be done, but you got to open that can, right? You got to open it up and say, what are you hoping for? What do you still want to achieve? And what that does for that person too is take them from a sense of helplessness and hopelessness and lack of control. They're getting control back, right? Now they're calling the work, what do I want? I'm going to name it. This is what I'm hoping for. This is what I want, and get some control back in that situation. So what he gave me in that moment, or those few moments of really deep conversation, was something that helped me for the rest of my career. So when he passed, I was sad, but I also felt blessed that I'd had that encounter with him because it changed the trajectory of my career. I'm telling you, it wasn't a little thing that he did for me when he talked to me about that. So that was my first takeaway. The second takeaway was next time my husband asked me to go see something, I'm going to go look and see.
Thank you, Connie, for the wonderful story. Thank you to all of our storytellers. Now let's give them a big round of applause to everyone who got up here and shared tonight. An outstanding group. The goosebumps are probably visible from out there, but it was pretty remarkable. There is the sign-up sheet over there. If you'd like to do one of these in the future months, the second Tuesday of the month is when we do this. And, no matter what kind of story you have to tell, we are interested in hearing it. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody thanks to everybody who's jumped in tonight.
That concludes this Yarn Factory listeners episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. We would love it if you could join us in person for the next Yarn Factory listeners. That will be Tuesday, July 9th at 7 p.m., most likely at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee. It's free to attend. You can also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already on your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Stephanie Vanderweide for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name to be announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor, Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.